Hello, and welcome to my podcast, where I get the chance to have a really great in-depth conversation about some of my favorite books, books that have influenced me, or I think I just want to dive in and know more about. This week, I will be discussing Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel, and I will be talking with Sarah Peck. Sarah Peck is an amazing human being. She is a writer, a storyteller, God, so many things. She does amazing handstands, yoga. Recently, she moved from California to New York City, where she's working together with me at 1 month. So in this interview together, we're going to talk about Esther Perel's book, Mating in Captivity, and we'll discuss some big themes of love and desire and possible skepticism towards marriage and ideas on how to really just like parse that in our heads. I think we hit some good ground and really unearth some of the really nice bits in this book. So looking forward to sharing the conversations. Stay tuned. And here we go. This is myself and Sarah Peck. Thanks, Sarah, for coming and chatting. We got the book here, Mating in Captivity, and we have 2 glasses of bourbon or wine or whatever you're drinking.
You're not supposed to tell people that.
Do we not talk about that?
They'll probably hear the clinking of
It's
our
nothing.
glasses as we go through
Nothing. It's nothing there. So the reason I wanted to talk to you about this book is because I feel like we always have these really great, long, never-ending conversations about everything about love, about
death,
about existential
sex.
dilemmas,
Yeah.
about babies, which neither of us have yet.
Right.
And
I'm drinking, so I'm definitely not having a baby right at this
we
moment.
just confirmed that we are both fertile and not pregnant. Is that the right way to put it? No.
Moving along. So we're going to talk about sex and all of the things.
Anyways, so so the thing, and so I wanted to chat with you about this, and the thing that the question in the book that just like I think is so driving and such a part of love, but everything that we do in humanity, it seems like creativity and all this is just like the things you have and the things you want. And then the question she asks is, how can you want what you already have? And to me, that's just this really haunting question that I feel like I ponder. And so what's your first reaction to that question?
I think Esther does such an interesting job asking questions that are hard. It's easy to write a prescriptive book that says, like, here's exactly what you need to have a perfect marriage and a perfect life, and this is what eroticism is, ABC, 1, 2, 3. And she doesn't do that. She asks really hard questions, and she says that eroticism is that space between having and wanting, and so it's a constant tension, and it's a very uncomfortable kind of idea. It's like, wait a second, how do you want something that you don't have, but then when you have something, how do you keep wanting it?
Yeah.
It's hard.
Totally. And one of my favorite parts in the book is when she's talking about, she's one of her patients and she's asking her, her patient says something like, well, how can you want me if you already, how can I want him if I already have him? Right. And then she was just like, we don't have each other. Like you can't have someone else.
You can't have a human being.
Even if you're married or whatever, even if it's a full-time employee or whatever, like social relationship, you don't have that person. There's always, each of us have our own. I think it's an important thing to zone into our brains.
I think it's really, so this relates to something that I took away from the book, that it's this idea that people look for love and they look for marriage as an antidote to loneliness.
Yeah.
And they're seeking to not be alone, to not feel alone. And to me, I think it's perfectly possible to feel alone and be in love at the same time.
Right. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I'm married. I have a wonderful husband. He's amazing. I call him like the love of my life, the light of my life, all of those things. And I can also feel existentially alone, and I can feel like I have a ton of questions about the world, and I can have a hard time connecting with him. And just because you're in a partnership or a relationship or you're single, it doesn't matter. You still have to confront the feelings that you have inside of who you are, and those don't go away just because you have a partnership.
Totally. Yeah. No, we're getting dark already. I love it.
Right to the existential questions about loneliness and what it means to be alive.
Yeah. And that seems so important. It reminds me of a quote by and the quote's something like, this is so dark, but it's like you were born alone, we die alone, but it's only love and friendship that makes the illusion such that it's not true, or something like that.
It is. You and I have similar thoughts on this, and I think the people who struggle the most, who want a partnership, are the people that haven't looked inside themselves to figure out why it is that they want that partnership, what it is that makes them feel lonely, what it is that makes them, like, what drives them, and what drives us. Right? We're all in this pool, this world together, but we feel so independent and alone, and reconciling that can be really difficult. So kind of to tie this back into what you were saying earlier, like her premise for the book is that it's this exact tension, this feeling of how does she define it? She defines like the space between wanting and having. That's what eroticism is. It's like when you catch your partner's eye across the room. Like, I identified with this so much. When I see Alex, who I'm married to, across the room at a party, like telling a story or putting on a show, and he's like in his suit and his tie, and he looked like he's combed his hair, and he's like very attractive, not just to me but to other people, and he's entertaining people. I will be, across the room having a conversation, doing my own thing, and then I look over and he's like, it's the 50-foot distance where I can't touch him and I can't actually talk to him. And I'm like, whoa, now he is an attractive man. And then I'm like, whoa, I married him. Right. But I'm not actually talking to him. I'm admiring him from afar.
Yeah. That's exactly, I think the term that Esther uses is erotic intelligence. And I think it's noticing the space, this gap you're talking about, and then creating that distance and letting it, kind of being okay with things being out of control a little bit.
Yeah.
And letting that be, because we have such a habit of, jealousy. When I think of jealousy, like the first word that comes to my mind is like every sitcom, and just like the two partners of like, I think she's cheating on me, or like we have this like grained into our head about the way, like I guess the narrative, or like the love narrative in America, about the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real need to challenge that, and to like let people, I don't say let people go, but like let people have that kind of distance and then come back to you. And
right, the lack of control, right? Jealousy stems from wanting to control or wanting to know. Yeah. It's like, I want to know what they're doing at all times. I want to know. I want to be in control.
Yeah.
But we can't
right.
be in control. And that uncertainty is so difficult, but it's also what's so enticing. When you, even if you're married, or she talks a lot about affairs, like if you go out to a bar and you flirt with people, or you catch people's eye, or you see people in a room, or it's dark, it's that possibility. It's that like excitement and anticipation that you don't know what's going to happen. Like, ooh, will I make out with that guy later on? Or, ooh, will he buy me a drink? Or, ooh, will I buy him a drink? However it goes. And that gets exciting and pleasurable, because that whole absence of control / I don't know what's going to happen, is that anticipation is what's exciting.
And I think that's what, like, so that anticipation, I think that's what is like the high, so to speak, of being single or being not married. I don't know how to say it, but you know what I mean? Is like the anticipation, like anything could happen.
Yeah.
But what, I can ask you, so, okay, that's great, but then what? Well, we all know it's like, well, then you go home a lot of nights and you're really lonely. So there's this like deeper, like, so with all, like with the highest highs, the lower lows are also there. She quotes, I think it's Anthony Robbins. There's like an Anthony Robbins quote in the book, and it's passion in a relationship is commensurate with the amount of uncertainty you can tolerate.
So I have a question. This is a question she asks in her book in the beginning, and it's a very difficult question, so you don't have to have an answer.
So you're gonna ask me this question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll ask both of us, because I haven't thought about the answer yet, and I don't know what the answer is. She says, when you love somebody, how does it feel?
Whoa.
What does it feel like for you?
So we're talking romantic love.
I think so.
I guess.
Because
there's like so many different kinds of love. There's like love for like a son, and I don't have a son, but there's a love for like a father. There's love for like a friend.
But all of those, I suppose. Like, what's the common thread? What do they feel like?
I think they're different, though. I think they're markedly different because, for example, if you have a love for a son, it should be a love of security. I think you are providing security for this person. If you have love for a friend, it's possible that it could be more of a love of, we go on adventures together, we go out dancing or whatever, and it could be a little, you don't need to know that they're going to be there every morning. I don't know, they can drink themselves silly. You might not be as affected as that. But I think like romantic love is somewhere in between, it's somewhere between a friend and family. So it's a large part. I think that's why it's so tricky. I think trying to get all of your energy from one person, trying to find all of these, like a best friend, a family member, exciting sex partner, like all this kind of stuff from one person. I think that's what makes it hard. So it's complex. Is that an answer? What do you think?
Yeah. I don't know. I am reminded of a story. I call Alex sometimes Papa Duckling.
Okay.
We don't have kids yet, but he's just as we've gotten to know each other and our like friendship, because I think we're friends. Esther says that it's like you don't want a best friend, that you want a partner or romantic love, and I don't know if I agree with her in that regards. But Alex will do this thing where he moves to the outside of the street when we're walking down the sidewalk, and he like goes to the outside as a protective mechanism because he doesn't want me to get hit by a car.
Oh yeah.
And then it's also like it's like a masculine feminine thing. Like David Data but he'll like, if I walk out into the street and I'm not paying attention and we're holding hands, he like holds me really tight and he pulls me back and he like sticks his arm out in front of me, and I feel like that's a kind of protective love that's it's kind of the same as parental in some regards. So I call him Papa Duck because like when he has kids and he has little ducklings, he's just going to his head's going to be darting all around and he's going to be like, where are my ducklings? Keep them safe. And he'll be like, like putting them under his wing. Yes. And it's so funny because that wasn't the same when we were first dating, nor was it the same like in the first year of like our boyfriend girlfriend status. And it's just grown over time where I think you realize the potential of what you have to lose. And then you get really like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think for sure the potential of what you have to lose.
It's really scary, right? Like as your potential for love increases, your potential for pain and suffering increases. And that's like kind of the conundrum of life, right? Like the more invested you are and the more excited you are about something, the more devastating it is when it's gone in some regards.
I think that's why it's hard to leave, if you've ever been in a situation, which I'm sure you have, where you had to leave someone who you had been with for a long time, but you knew it wasn't going to work out.
Yes.
Because you've invested so much, and like that person maps part of you, and they have part of you inside of them, and you've put your time into it. So I guess there's some like buyer's remorse and like, all this
buyer's
whatever it is, right? You're like, I put so much into this. I don't
sunk costs.
Yeah,
that relationship. No, I know
and
what
you just
mean.
keep kind of like chugging it along.
Yeah.
It's I get that. I think the investment adds up for sure over
It's
time.
true. It's the same, like stepping away from romantic relationships for a second.
Okay.
Like think about your work or your job.
Yeah.
I went to graduate school and I got a 4-year degree in psychology and then a 3-year degree in architecture. Yeah. And so 7 years later and $100,000 in debt, I start this journey to become an architect. And I worked for 5 years in architecture. And I quit. And I switched and I started writing stuff and I started a blog and I taught myself how to build websites, and then I joined a startup. And like the inertia of that move, of that change, where you have to be like, actually the past 12 years, I'm going to switch.
Right.
Is the same as like a relationship, right? You're like, how do I kill off that earlier part and say it's okay? Because a lot of people, like once they make a decision, they just keep going forward and they don't want to think about the risk of changing.
Yeah. That's interesting because like in that story, it seems like from my outside perspective, it seems kind of easy, not easy, but like it seems like natural that you would not kill your darlings, but you know what I mean? Like kind of in a way, like the darlings of your ego, you're like, this is the person who I think I'm going to be, this is the person. And then at some point you're like, I'm going to do something totally different. Yeah. That seems like healthy, I guess, is like part of,
I
'cause you're
agree, but
growing.
it's so hard to do. It's like
Yes,
shedding
it's
a
not
snake
easy.
skin
Right.
or whatever. I've never shed a snake skin, really. So I don't
like
actually
snake.
know
Yeah.
what that feels like. But in my mind, I imagine it because you really have to let go of an old part of yourself and
Yeah.
like transform and renew and start over again, right? Like be
Yeah.
new and infantile or junior at something, and that's really hard. And that's what you have to do in the dating realm too. It's like you're leaving something that is good and comfortable and maybe even great, but stale or tired or not quite right, and you just know that it's not quite right, and you have to go through that whole trapeze.
Yeah.
Trapeze? Am I saying that
Trapeze,
word?
yeah.
Trapeze?
Circus.
Sometimes I say words a lot and I don't know what they mean. Jump, where you're like letting go of one thing before you can start the next thing.
Totally.
It's hard.
What do you think that Esther would say about that?
Oh, so many things. There's so many questions I have too
Yeah.
that I want to talk about. Like we were chatting before we got on the air
You
about you and me.
Okay.
You and me.
Hello.
You and me.
You and me.
And me and you.
Yeah.
We were chatting about like how eroticism or attraction plays out with jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a company, if you want to keep your employees, how do you maintain that attractiveness and that desire in a company?
Right. I think, and to kind of clarify what we were talking about, so you're talking about the idea of like you bring somebody on full time and nobody is a blank slate. Like they're coming with all their relationships and their blogs they've written and their movies they've been in, or whoever knows, whatever successes that they consider their successes. And then you come here and all right, we're talking about you, right? So we're talking about Sarah. Like Sarah's coming here.
If anybody doesn't know, like Chris and I work at the same company
Yes.
at the time of this recording. We're working
Exactly.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've both been, and you've spoken at conferences, like hundreds of conferences, and you've written all these things and done these things. So it's like, how does that part, that definition of who Sarah Peck is now become your Sarah Peck at the company 1 month?
Right.
So like, how do you change that?
Yeah, and it's the same question for
without
teachers,
being
right?
swallowed by it.
Right.
Right.
And I think this, like we can talk about my experience, but then it applies to everyone, right? Like how do you, because here within 1 month, where we're working, everybody here is so extraordinary and has so many outsized talents and things that they do. It's like, oh, by the way, so and so is also like a recording artist and a sound engineer and a philosopher and a poet and like does DJing things on the side and does this and like happens to be a yoga teacher and
and
like,
that's all just Matan.
Yeah, exactly.
Zing.
That's just done. Then there's everyone else.
Then there's everyone else. No, just kidding.
He should do those all at once for a show at some point. So anyways, and it's like, how do you embrace these really complex and interesting individuals and then bring them into a company where you hire them to do this singular job, like this thing that you need to solve, and how do you embrace the fact that what attracted you to that person is what you need to maintain in order to keep both you as a company happy and them as I'm putting air quotes, employee happy. And so I think there's actually a lot to be learned from Esther about eroticism and attraction and desire and people and apply it to the workplace.
That sounds like a blog post or a book could be written, I guess. No, it's definitely like taking the romantic eroticism and applying it to, is that what Tim's book's about? The business romantic?
A little bit, right? Yeah, he talks about like passion and suffering and being a stranger and keeping the distance between people. So yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
I think the two of their books have a lot to say about people and how we treat them. And the reason why we were talking about this earlier is because like one of the things we want to do is bring people in and then keep them whole and interesting and wonderful. And one of the exact reasons why we're even recording this right now is because it's just a side project. We're not doing it as part of some strategy or initiative or master planned marketing campaign, right? Like we're doing it because you and I just like talking to each other.
Exactly. Pouring some more bourbon. Okay, I hear that.
Wait.
That's a heavy pour. Yeah, I think that's important. Yeah, I think it's like important to have be your own person. But that's like, that seems like the plight of America in my kind of eyes. In a way, it's like everybody, the old world. Like I guess my parents' generation or something, it just like seemed like you sold yourself to a company. You know what I mean? It was this kind of corporate thing you were buying into. And now it seems like there's a lot more opportunity to like be an individual but at a company. Maybe that's with blogging, kind of democratizing that everyone can have a voice, or all like we just know. I was at House of Genius last night. It's this thing in New York. It's this anonymous idea farm. I don't know how to explain it, but more or less the opening question was, what's your hustle? But more importantly, what's your side hustle? And it was like everyone had amazing answers. Do you know what I mean? Like everybody in New York, at least, probably in the world, but like has a side hustle, like a thing that you're really excited about and maybe you don't get to talk about. And probably being able to nourish both of those, you know, between the hours of 9 to 5, so to speak, at some point, you know.
I totally agree.
Somehow. And it's not easy. If it was easy, I mean, love's not easy, right? Like all these things aren't easy.
I think this all actually can be even within one person. So for me, I've always written on the side. It's been my side hustle, writing. And I, wrote a blog, and I've, over the course of a number of years, published lots and lots of essays on that blog. And the interesting thing is I have this attraction towards writing where it's always been the other thing. And I've never made it my main hustle because it's more intriguing and interesting to me that way.
You're having an affair with writing.
I am, right? And like there's always that question, like, well, if I made writing my full-time thing, or if I didn't have a job, or if I wasn't selling products or this, could I make it as a writer? And I think there's something really, like, even within your own self, attractive about having this other thing, this fantasy, this dream, right? Yeah. Whether it's like learning the guitar or writing on the side or learning how to code, you always need something that you're attracted to. And then there's also the comfort and the stability of whatever relationship you have that's primary. And just, you need to nurture that in yourself. I don't know. Am I...
100%.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
100%.
Yeah. So it's like it's your responsibility as an individual too to keep exploring and finding things that you personally find attractive and satisfying, and you're not obligated to those side hustles either.
And I have an idea which I think is ready for this.
Yes.
Not too much drama, but
okay.
I think even more importantly, like a takeaway, for us or anyone listening, is encouraging that in the people around you.
Yeah.
Because that's the number one thing, is that you feel like, I'm not contributing enough, I'm not doing enough work here, I'm not good enough to be a writer.
Yeah.
But anything that I've had the opportunity, even just sitting here with you right now, is like, you were like, I'm like, hey, want to talk about mating in captivity? Like, I might turn microphones on and make a pod. You're like, yes. Like, what if you were like, I don't have time for that. Or if you were like, that's stupid. Or like so-and-so already did something like that, But I think, surrounding yourself by people and being that person that just says yes. Like, go take an improv class and be like, yes, and to everything in life. You know what I mean?
And that's what I think marriage should be. I totally agree with you. I love all of this.
Yeah.
Marriage is like improv. Absolutely. More on that later. But I totally agree. And I think the best thing you can do for your teammates, for your coworkers, for your friends as a boss is like to look at the person and understand their like, how are they doing? And if they're struggling a little bit, tell them to do something completely different. Like take a day off, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have a million type A people here because we're all such extreme performers and achievers, et cetera. So the most radical thing you could tell one of us is like, step away from the computer. Right? Like, that's the radical thing.
I heard a rumor that on Monday, if you texted us back because you were on vacation, you would have to pay us $1,000 or something like that.
In order to get myself to take a vacation, I told everyone, I was like, if I Slack you, I have to pay you $1,000.
Right.
And everyone was like, I'll take that bet. That's a great one.
I was here. People were like
waiting.
I'm going to text her and see if she writes back. Yeah.
I did Slack someone.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Anyways, but yeah, you have to like understand who you are, and then also like that break, that taking that time away, taking a little pause, telling somebody like, hey Chris, you work an insane amount, and I think that you should go and do this other thing, this totally different thing. Start a podcast on your own, because that stimulates our creativity and our excitement, and that just makes us more interesting and compelling in our work.
And I think it's important to have these I think also having these conversations with people around you, because like, I think if you're listening, or if this is like new, because I mean, this is like, I mean, you and Sarah, like me and Sarah, like I'm looking at you right now, like this is like, it's hard for us, and I feel like we talk about it an intense amount and think about it an intense amount. But I can imagine if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't want to feel that uncertainty in my job or as a boss having my employees have this autonomy or even in a relationship. So it's like, well, maybe if you can't make those decisions, getting to the place where you can encourage people, maybe the first step is just having the conversation. He's really non-committal, just to ask like, well, what's your side hustle? Or
yeah.
I mean, just,
or what do you like doing, for fun? Or like,
something I like too? So there's this thing that we do here at one-on-ones when we meet just one-on-one, and Rosebud and Thorn. And the idea is you just ask somebody, so I ask, Sarah and I work together, and we'll do this. I guess we'll do this on Friday, actually. We have it set up, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just say, hey, Sarah, like, what's a rose? What's something that you're glad for, happy about?
Right.
What's a bud? What's something that it's going to bloom and that you're looking forward to? And what's a thorn? What's something that you're not so happy about?
Exactly.
Right? And those 3 questions are really this gateway into people's minds. And now I'm going to spin it a little bit, because that's just what we know. That's what we do here in the business kind of sense, in the office. So I suggested this to my friend Alexis to do it for his girlfriend. And it was an experiment because I wanted to do it with with my ex-girlfriend at the time. And I wanted to do it, but I was kind of cowardly. I'll be honest. It was like, I was like, I don't know. That's like, because the questions it's going to open. And I told him that, and he's like, I'll do it. And I was like, okay. And they would do it every Sunday night. He tried it once, and then they started doing it every Sunday night. And watching from afar, like, everything came out. And he said it was really hard the first few weeks because you have these really difficult conversations. Yeah. But goddamn, it brought them so close together. And like, he felt like he could give her that distance more because he just knew, he had those weekly check-ins. Yeah. It's so important.
I think that's so great. And what you said too about having the conversation or having the tool or the mechanism, like somebody who's never heard of Rosebud and Thorn can then go, oh, hey, do you want to play this game with me? It's called Rosebud and Thorn. And I heard about it on this radio show. And like, are we a radio show now? I guess we are.
Now we're a radio show.
Yeah. Or a podcast or whatever this turns out to be. And it gives somebody a way to have a conversation and a way to do something a little bit deeper. And that it's nobody's fault. And the first one's always the hardest. Yeah. Because you have to bring up something that might be difficult. Right. And then it gets easier because you know that you can make it through.
And it's easier when you heard, I like what you just said, because it's easier when you've heard that someone else suggested it to you.
Yes.
And because if you're like, I made this thing up, there's a lot of weight on you that this thing better be good. But if we recommended it and you try it and it failed, you can just be like, fuck those people.
Right. And if you just go to somebody and you're like, I just want to talk about what's wrong with you, it doesn't really go over so well.
Thorn. I got some thorns.
Yeah. But if you present it as a game or like a tool, and then also it's not your responsibility, like you were just saying, good. Yeah. And that's so helpful because Matan will ask me that in our one-on-ones, and when I get to talk about those challenges, it reveals a lot about who you are as a person. I'll say I really struggle because I get up in the morning, and this is like, I'm being totally honest here. I get up in the morning and I want to check my email first thing, and I work, and like I start working at 7 and I just want to answer everybody's requests, and then I don't get the most important things done. How do I change that, right? How do I modify my own behavior or change that? And you are both so insightful about like, oh, okay, right? And you get to both give me recommendations, and also now when I message you at 7 a.m., you guys are like, oh, Sarah said she doesn't want to be doing that. How do I help support her? Like, should I not respond to her? Like, and it's really great because then we're able to talk about this thing of me being a better person for the company, and because it's something I struggle with. And it's created some of the deepest conversations, and I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's a good place to start. And maybe to end too. Just having more conversations and keeping things open. Yeah. Is there any closing? I know you have some. Do you have any last favorite moments of the book, or like you said, you had a quote or two that you wanted to tell me about? I'd love to hear it.
I have two big topics we could talk about.
Is this from the book?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me.
She says something about shifting your identity.
Okay.
About whether you call it role playing or just understanding your multidimensional personality. But she has this quote about, it's called taking off the apron. And it relates to wives, and like wives in particular are caregivers, and they take care of people who are around them, kids, parents, all the things before then settling at home. And it can be really hard to feel attraction and feel attractive when you have the apron still on. And she says there needs to be this transition period where you shift your identity into a more sensual being. You let your hair down, and, all these cues. And in dating, we have ritualized cues where it's like you get ready for a date, you go out, you're at a low lit bar, you're having a meal. Like a meal in itself is sensual. You have alcohol, right? And you set up this whole thing where the whole thing is a dance and it's erotic. And then when you get into partnerships and you get into other things, you can lose your eroticism because you forget that we have multiple identities.
I think you forget, and I think it becomes there's like something about like the ritual that's sacred, but there's something about the ritual that becomes mundane. If you like do it over and over again, it becomes like rehearsed or something, and you lose the magic, right? Like how many times can you, let's say you put on fancy shoes on a Friday and go to like the fanciest pizza restaurant in town or whatever the hell you do. Yeah. Like how many times can you do that before you know every aspect of that? And it's the whole thing about what we started talking about with having and wanting. And it's like, yeah, I want to go to this place and get pizza with you, whatever. I'm using this silly example, but you do it so many times and then you kind of have that. There's like no... And
unexpected newness.
Nothing's gonna happen. Yeah. I love what Chris Rock has this joke when he's like, you get in marriage and you get to a certain point, and your wife comes home and you're like, how was your day? And like she says the same thing, and he's like, go out and have something happen to you. Like, go get kidnapped. Yes. Come back. Yes. And then we'll talk about your day.
That's amazing. That's actually what happened. So Alex and I worked together.
You got kidnapped, yeah.
No, I didn't get kidnapped, but we both did consulting gigs, and we worked from home for a year. And then we would be done with our job, and we get to the end of our day, we'd be like, well, how was your day? Well, I was right here.
That's really funny.
How was your day? It was exactly as you saw it. I wore pajamas for half of it. Right. I answered telephone calls the rest of it.
I'm going to go to my Airbnb that I rented across the street
now I'm printing out my TPS report, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Right? And it was like, oh my God, we need something to talk about. Like, it was actually one of my, the most exciting things. One of the exciting things about working for 1 month is that I would have news stories to tell when I got home.
You get out of the house.
Yeah,
you have to leave your house and come here. Yeah.
Yeah. But even then, like, I'll come home and I'll be in work mode, which is powerful and strategic and planful and more masculine in orientation. And I'll get home and I'll be like, blah, 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 blah. And then like transitioning from that to a more erotic or romantic space is hard. And we have to cue each other, just like you're dating. And we have to say things like I'll say, like, literally, I'll say this. I'll be like, I'm in work mode. I need some time to transition.
Get it.
It's like, it's like I'm just like, I need some time to transition. Yes. And like, he knows right away. He's like, right, can't throw her on the bed. Like, she'd be like, get off me, fool. Like, go away.
Right.
Yeah. And so he's like, oh, okay. All right. And he like turns a couple of lights off and he's like, go change, like go shower and change, like get your hair down. Like, I'll cook some dinner. I'm like, great. And then we have wine and we like have dinner together and it's like, how was your day? Great. And that unwinding and unspooling is the whole, I'm using air quotes, right? Like taking the apron off. And that's me transitioning from work Sarah into like feminine and soft and playful.
I love it. I love like the image of taking the apron off. And it reminds me of something that, speaking of Anthony Robbins, another thing that he said is just, he calls it a state change, and you can use that as a skill to get out of like from getting from work Sarah to play Sarah. Or he even talks about it with people that are like exacerbated with their lover, or they're crying and stuff like that. And he has this one thing which just sounds really cruel, but he pours water on their head. Like, it was like, and they're like, well, what did you do that for, Tony?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, see, now you're not mad about him anymore. You're talking to me. Like, you're present.
Right. And snapping into it.
You need something. I mean, and that's an extreme example, but like if it's wine, I think that's why so many people, come home and they pour that glass of wine.
Exactly.
You need this. You need the cue to in your brain go,
right.
Oh, this is not.
It's not about the alcohol, and it's not about the buzz. It's like literally having the glass of wine in your hand changes who you are. And with role playing, that word has a bad rap. It's like you think of like, oh, I've got to dress up as sexy kitten or whatever, like whatever you're doing. And I've never dressed up as a sexy kitten.
Sound effects.
What? That'll be for the B-roll. But the idea of role playing, like we all have multiple identities, tons of them, right? You have your work persona, your mother persona, your friend persona, your this persona, you're like free and loose. It's why we dress up at night. It's why we go out. It's why all of these things.
Yep.
And understanding that can help, I think, with relationships, because you realize, oh, let me change states, whatever it takes me to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Sarah, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is great.
This is fun.
We could do it forever. You know that.
Let's find more books to talk about.
Okay, more books. Yes.
More books. All right. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Bye.
That was super fun.
Sexy whisper voice at the end.
All right. Thanks for listening. And I want to again thank Sarah Peck. She's amazing, right? Is she not? That was such a great conversation, and we could have kept going for hours. So yes, thank you for listening. I will have show notes and notes from the book up on my site. You can find that at castig.org. It's CASTIG.org. My Twitter is at Castig as well, where you can tell me if you want to suggest some books, if you want to tell me things you liked, if you want me to keep doing these, all of that. Just kind of give me a prod and say, yeah, this was pretty good or not. Let me know what you're thinking. And hopefully I'll do a few more of these in good time. So until then, I would recommend you check out Mating in Captivity and keep reading. See ya.